Have you ever looked around a crowded coffee shop on a Tuesday morning and really observed the people sitting there? Specifically, the men. You see a lot of blank stares, a lot of exhausted posture, people scrolling endlessly on their phones, looking like they are running on absolute fumes. We usually just call it modern burnout. We blame the economy, we blame our jobs, we blame not getting enough coffee. But what if a massive piece of this exhaustion, this profound lack of drive, isn't just psychological? What if it is deeply, invisibly biological?
That is exactly the question we have to start asking, because we are looking at a quiet epidemic right now. When people hear the word testosterone, they immediately picture a bodybuilder in a gym or some loud, aggressive internet influencer selling a supplement. We have completely caricatured this hormone. We've reduced it to a punchline about alpha males and muscle mass, but from a clinical and biological standpoint, that is a tragic misunderstanding. We are talking about a foundational signaling molecule that shapes not just physical strength, but mental clarity, emotional resilience, and the fundamental desire to engage with life.
And that's exactly why we need to tear down this misconception today. Because the statistics are honestly staggering. If you look at the data, average testosterone levels across the global male population have been steadily declining for decades. A man in his 30s today, on average, has significantly lower levels than a man of the exact same age in the 1980s. So, before we even get into the why of that terrifying trend, let's establish the baseline. Biologically speaking, what was this hormone actually designed to do for us?
At its absolute core, you can think of testosterone as the hormone of effort and adaptation. Throughout human history, survival required an immense amount of physical and psychological friction. You needed courage to face threats, you needed the motivation to hunt, the drive to compete for resources, and the physical resilience to recover from injury. Testosterone is the chemical messenger that supports all of those behaviors. It tells the body, we need to be strong, we need to be alert, and we need to push forward. And I should clarify, women produce and need testosterone too. It plays a vital role for them. But male biology relies on it at much higher concentrations to maintain a baseline of well-being.
So it's essentially the biological currency of motivation. It's the friction overcoming molecule.
That is a brilliant way to put it. It's the friction overcoming molecule. When a man has healthy, optimized levels, he doesn't just find it easier to put on muscle, he actually experiences life differently. He has a sharper sense of focus, a higher tolerance for risk, a natural sense of confidence, and a much quicker recovery time both physically and mentally. But when those levels crash, the world suddenly feels incredibly heavy.
Which sounds exactly like the symptoms of clinical depression or severe burnout. I've spoken to so many guys who say, I just don't care anymore. I have no ambition. I feel emotionally flat. They think it's a character flaw. They think they've just become lazy.
And that breaks my heart, because they carry this immense guilt. They think they are failing as fathers, as partners, or as professionals. But if you look under the hood, their biology is running on empty. When testosterone drops, you don't just lose muscle tone, you lose your edge. You become fatigued, unmotivated, and emotionally blunted. You lose that spark of competitiveness that makes you want to step up to a challenge. It is a profound shift in how you experience reality.
Okay, so this brings us to the million-dollar question. If this hormone is so critical for our drive and our survival, why is modern society draining it out of us? What is it about the way we live today that is causing this generational collapse in our biology?
It comes down to a perfect storm of environmental and lifestyle factors, but the biggest culprit is chronic stress. We have to understand how the body prioritizes survival. Your body operates on a very strict energy budget. When you are constantly stressed, maybe you are worried about emails, mortgages, social media, the news, your brain perceives that as a literal survival threat. It doesn't know the difference between a looming deadline and a looming predator. So, it pumps out cortisol, our primary stress hormone.
And cortisol and testosterone don't exactly play nicely together, do they?
Not at all. They are essentially on a biological seesaw. When cortisol goes up and stays up, testosterone goes down. Think of it like a sinking ship. If your ship is taking on water, which is the stress, the captain is going to order all hands on deck to bail out the water. He is not going to assign a crew to paint the dining room or upgrade the engine. Testosterone is the upgrade. it's long-term optimization. Cortisol is the emergency response. Modern life keeps us in a perpetual low-grade emergency. So the body says, reproduction, muscle building, ambition, we don't have time for that. We are just trying to survive the week.
That is such a powerful metaphor. The body is abandoning long-term growth just to keep the lights on. And I imagine our modern sleep habits are just pouring gasoline on that fire.
Gasoline is an understatement. Sleep deprivation is an absolute disaster for hormonal health. The vast majority of a man's daily testosterone is produced during the deep phases of sleep. It's like a factory that only opens at night. But look at what we do today. We stay up until 1 in the morning, staring at artificial blue light, doom scrolling through negative news, disrupting our circadian rhythms. We are effectively shutting down the factory before it even starts production. If you take a healthy young man and restrict his sleep to 5 hours a night for just 1 week, his testosterone levels will drop by 10 to 15%. That is the equivalent of aging him by a decade in just 7 days.
Aging a decade in a week. That is terrifying. And you mentioned doom scrolling, which brings me to a really fascinating angle here. The screen culture. We live our lives through these glowing rectangles. How does this digital existence, this constant barrage of instant gratification, actually alter our neurochemistry and our hormones?
It fundamentally rewires our reward system. Let's look at dopamine, which is closely tied to testosterone and motivation. Historically, to get a dopamine hit, you had to do something difficult. You had to build something, hunt something, or explore somewhere new. There was a direct correlation between effort and reward. Today, you can get a massive spike of dopamine just by swiping your thumb on a piece of glass. You can watch a 10-second video and feel a rush of novelty.
So we are getting the neurochemical reward of a massive achievement without actually achieving anything.
Exactly. We are hacking the system. And when the brain gets used to cheap, instant, effortless dopamine, it downregulates its own motivation pathways. Why would your body synthesize the hormones required for long-term, painful, difficult effort when it thinks you are already winning all day long on your phone? The nervous system becomes completely overloaded and exhausted by this constant, cheap stimulation. The result is a man who is wired, anxious, but completely devoid of real-world ambition.
It's the illusion of conquering the world while you're actually just sitting on the couch, which naturally leads us to the physical reality of sitting on that couch. We can't talk about hormones without talking about metabolism. There seems to be a very dangerous feedback loop between the modern diet, physical inactivity, and this hormonal crash.
It is a vicious, self-accelerating cycle. Healthy testosterone is highly protective of your metabolism. It helps partition nutrients toward building muscle rather than storing fat. It maintains insulin sensitivity. But when your levels drop due to stress or lack of sleep, you start losing muscle mass and you start gaining fat, particularly visceral fat around the organs.
And that belly fat isn't just inert storage, right? It's actually biologically active.
That is the crucial point. Adipose tissue, especially visceral fat, acts almost like its own organ. It produces an enzyme called aromatase. What aromatase does is literally convert your precious testosterone into estrogen. So, the more belly fat you gain, the more of your testosterone is actively destroyed and turned into estrogen. This lowers your testosterone further, which makes you more tired, which makes you exercise less, which makes you gain more fat, which creates more aromatase. It is a biological death spiral.
Wow. So modern metabolic disease and hormonal collapse aren't just happening at the same time. They're actively feeding each other. You're literally cannibalizing your own drive.
Precisely, and this is why the quick fixes you see advertised online are so frustrating to watch. You see men desperate to feel normal again, and they are buying these expensive, exotic herbal supplements that promise to boost your alpha energy. But if you are sleeping 5 hours a night, eating highly processed foods, and living in a state of chronic anxiety, no pill in the world is going to save you. You cannot supplement your way out of a biologically hostile lifestyle.
So let's pivot to the solution, because I don't want to leave people feeling hopeless. If the modern world is designed to strip this vitality away, how do we fight back? What does it actually take to restore this biological baseline naturally?
We have to return to the absolute fundamentals, and we have to treat them with the respect they deserve. The first and most non-negotiable step is sleep architecture. You have to protect your deep sleep. That means cold room, no screens, an hour before bed, and waking up at a consistent time to anchor your circadian rhythm. You have to give the factory time to do its work.
And I assume lifting heavy things is still on the menu?
Absolutely. Resistance training is profound. When you put a heavy load on your muscles and central nervous system, you are sending a loud, undeniable signal to your biology that says, we need to be stronger to survive our environment. The body responds to that mechanical tension by upregulating testosterone production. But it's not about spending 3 hours in the gym doing bicep curls. It's about compound movements, squats, deadlifts, presses, things that require full body coordination and effort.
It's almost like you have to artificially reintroduce the physical friction that modern convenience has eliminated from our daily lives.
That is exactly what exercise is. It is a controlled, deliberate dose of physical stress that forces a positive adaptation. But, and this is a huge caveat, you have to balance that physical stress with profound recovery. If you train like an absolute beast but you don't sleep, and you are stressed out of your mind at work, you will just drive your cortisol higher and crush your testosterone further.
It's the yin and yang of biology. You can't just have the stress, you need the stillness.
Exactly, which brings us to the psychological piece, stress management. We have to find ways to signal safety to our nervous system, whether that is through breathwork, walking in nature without a phone, or just sitting in silence. You have to show your brain that the tiger is not chasing you. When you lower that cortisol burden, the testosterone naturally rises to fill the space.
You know, what strikes me about everything we are discussing is how it completely redefines what masculinity actually means in a biological sense. The internet portrays it as this loud, aggressive, dominating force. But listening to you, the biology of a healthy man sounds incredibly grounded. It's about resilience, stability, and quiet energy.
I am so glad you brought that up. True biological optimization does not make you erratic or aggressive. High testosterone, when balanced with a healthy lifestyle, actually makes you calmer. It makes you more emotionally stable. Think about it. If you have the biological confidence to handle whatever life throws at you, you don't need to shout. You don't need to be reactive. You have a deep, sustained energy that allows you to be patient, to be disciplined, and to build things of lasting value. The aggressive, reactive behavior we often see is usually a sign of insecurity and hormonal imbalance, not optimization.
That is a profound paradigm shift. And it gives me a lot of hope, especially with the rise of wearable technology. People can finally see their sleep data, their heart rate variability, their stress spikes. It takes this invisible crisis and makes it visible. Do you think this awareness is going to change the trajectory we are on?
I really do. We are entering an era of biological accountability. For a long time, men felt terrible, but had no data to explain why. Now, a guy can look at his wrist and say, wow, my deep sleep was terrible because I drank alcohol and scrolled on my phone until midnight, and now I can see that my recovery is in the red. When you can see the data, you can change the behavior. Awareness is the first step out of the trap. We are finally realizing that our health is not a given. It is something we have to actively cultivate and protect against a modern environment that wants to erode it.
It's taking radical responsibility for your own hardware. This conversation has been incredibly illuminating. We've moved so far past the gym bro stereotypes and really touched on the essence of what it means to be a healthy, functioning human in an increasingly unnatural world. It's not just about building muscle. It is about reclaiming the energy and the drive to live a meaningful life.
It has been an absolute pleasure. If there is one thing I want people to take away, it is to stop blaming yourself for feeling exhausted and start looking at your environment. Protect your sleep, challenge your body, and give yourself the grace to recover. Your biology wants to thrive. You just have to give it the right environment to do so.
A perfect final thought. To everyone listening, I hope this episode makes you look at your daily habits, your sleep, your screen time, your stress, through a totally different lens. Modern life might be designed to drain your batteries, but you have the power to take the plug back out of the wall. Protect your biology, protect your drive, and we will see you in the next episode.